Good evening and welcome to the Essex County Museum and Historical Society and the opening of our new permanent exhibit, Dreams Deferred, Goals Realized, the African American Experience in Essex. I'm Meg Hodges, the museum's executive director. We're delighted to have you here with us for the opening of what's our first permanent exhibit in several years. The museum is marking our 25th anniversary this year. We were incorporated and opened our doors in May of 1997. And over the course of the year, we'll be doing a lot to recognize and honor many volunteers and supporters who helped build and nurture the museum and get us to this point. But at the same time, we're developing new programs and new exhibits that really engage a larger audience, a more diverse audience, and that really showcase all that Essex County has to offer in terms of our history. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here tonight, particularly those of you who are joining us virtually online. And we hope that if you're not here with us tonight, that you will come by the museum the next time you're in Tappahannock so you can see our lovely exhibit. I also want to thank, and you're going to be hearing more about them in a second, our presenters, Gina McGuire, Besida Cawthorn White, and Stanley Clark, not only for their help tonight, but for their support and guidance over the past months. Their knowledge of and passion for history, particularly African American history, has been a huge asset to the museum, and it really is a huge asset to our community. So, to tell you more about the exhibit and its creation, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, David Jett. David's been the museum's curator since 2004, and his expertise and creative talents are not only featured in this exhibit, but in all the other exhibits and displays you see around the museum. He's not only a knowledgeable historian, but he's a talented artist as well. And he painted all of these backdrops here, as well as many of the other murals that you see around the walls of the museum. We are lucky to have him, and it's my pleasure to introduce him to you tonight, David Jett. David?
Thank you, Meg. Since its beginning 25 years ago, our museum has featured various Black history topics in both long-term and temporary exhibitions. Our new exhibition tonight takes up the very challenging task of covering in one space 320 years of Essex County African American history, from slavery to the Civil Rights era, spanning the years from 1650 to 1970. It is divided into three sections, which will be commented on by our three presenters. The first section covers the slavery era, emancipation, and the Reconstruction era. The second section covers the Jim Crow segregation era. And the third and final covers the Civil Rights era. As I was exploring this rich historical tapestry, I have observed that perhaps the strongest and brightest thread running through it was the desire for knowledge, for education, sparked and sustained by faith and pursued with great determination. From the enslaved boy Henry Young on Greenfield Plantation, who traded a cake of cornbread for a spelling book, to the proud graduate of Rappahannock Industrial Academy, the private Black high school at Ozina, to pioneering teachers like Catherine Green Amy, who were among the first to teach here in the predominantly white schools in the 1960s. And finally, to see the construction of a brand new and fully desegregated Essex High School in 1970, which is depicted in the mural there. There's an artifact on display in our exhibit that I would like to call to your attention that I believe we are very fortunate to have in our collection. This is the small Essex County African American made slant top desk dating to perhaps about 1840. It is a rare survivor that speaks of the almost lost and forgotten tradition of craftsmanship practiced in earlier days by both enslaved and free Blacks in Essex County. We're also very fortunate to have two excellent published sources that were essential to me in putting together this exhibition. They are settlers, Southerners, Americans. A very comprehensive history of Essex County by James Slaughter. And Uprooted and Transplanted, a focus on Essex African American history by Lillian McGuire. And this book has just recently been reprinted by our museum. Both books are available in our gift shop and also on our website. I hope that everyone will come again and enjoy our new exhibition. There's an awful lot to absorb in there, and also enjoy our entire museum and our new Max Silver Memorial Courtyard. Our first presenter this evening is Besida Cawthorn White. Besida Cawthorn White grew up in Middlesex County, but her Essex County family roots go back 9 generations to an immigrant born in London in 1620. An activist, retired attorney, genealogist, and community historian, she holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Virginia State College, now University, and a Juris Doctorate from the College of William and Mary. Her focus areas as an activist include African American, women's, and LGBTQ+ rights. She is president and co-founder of Middle Peninsula African American Genealogical and Historical Society, and is president of the board of Rappahannock Industrial Academy Alumni Association. A member of the board of the Black History Museum and Cultural Center of Virginia for more than 20 years, she currently serves on the boards of Middlesex County Museum and Historical Society and the Library of Virginia Foundation. She is chair of the trustee board and church historian at Angel Visit Baptist Church in Essex County, and has been a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated for 55 years. Besida is the daughter of the late Gladys Cawthorn White and the late Randolph Kyler White. She is married to Philip M. Bladen, and they have one daughter, Lauren Cawthorn Bladen White. Please welcome Besida Cawthorn White.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, David, for inviting me to share this time with you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about African American history, and I am passionate about it. I was thinking that I really had a lot of material here, and I said to David, maybe I should cut it in half. But then I thought, we are trying to summarize and make concise so many years of history and so many people who have been unnamed that we need to call their names and take the time we need to say those names. And so if you'll indulge me, I'm trying not to be really lengthy, but I do want to call some of the names. I'm so appreciative to the museum. David has just been a wonderful partner over the years. We approached him about 5 or 6 years ago and said, we'd like to see an exhibition on the Rappahannock Industrial Academy. 3 months later, we had an exhibition. So David, thank you for all that you do, and he's such a resource. So I'm supposed to talk about this first section of the exhibition, and I'll try to run through some things quickly. So, of course, in August of 1619, the first documented Africans arrived in British North America. We have to say that because in Spanish North America, there were probably other documented Black folk already. When 20 and odd Africans arrived at Point Comfort in Hampton, Virginia, now Fort Monroe, not at Jamestown like we originally thought, but at Fort Comfort. So Africans are thought to have arrived in Essex about 1650. So for over 200 years, enslaved Africans constituted a vital labor force that helped build and sustain Essex County. They cleared forests, erected buildings, raised the cash crop of tobacco and other farm products, and provided essential craft and domestic services. 250 choice Gambia slaves were offered at a 3-day auction in Tappahannock in the mid-1700s. However, many of the wealthier plantation owners purchased enslaved persons directly from ships that approached their private docks on the Rappahannock River, in some instances after having placed orders for a particular ethnicity or persons from a certain region. Now, we often have the concept, I have people call me all the time and say, I want to find the plantation in Essex County where my people were enslaved. And we have this idea that there was always this huge plantation. Sometimes there were large plantations. However, many enslavers were fairly poor and only enslaved a few people. Others were of moderate means, and the numbers of their enslaved were consistent with their worth. There were, of course, some very wealthy persons who held hundreds of persons enslaved. So I'll give you some examples, and I want to call these names. Iverson Granderson was enslaved by a man named Lawrence Harper, who was a carpenter at Dunsville. In 1859, as a part of the vigorous domestic slave trade in the region, Granderson was sold down the river, sold south to Mississippi, leaving a wife and child in Essex County whom he never saw again in this life. In the 1860 slave census, Harper holds 2 persons enslaved, an 18-year-old woman and a 2-year-old boy, thought to be Granderson's wife and child. Harper is obviously not of means, and his carpentry ventures do not seem to be particularly lucrative. By the way, Iverson Granderson ended up fighting for his freedom as a sailor in the United States Navy during the Civil War. His great-granddaughter, Jeanette Braxton Secret, who lives in Florida, is now actively seeking her Essex County roots. And another example, in the 1860 slave census at Ozena in Central Essex, my double great-grandfather, that's a great-great, Robert S. Cawthorn, who was a farmer, enslaved 23 persons, 22 of whom were listed as Black, and 1 3-year-old mulatto boy who is thought to be his son and my great-grandfather. In 1860, his real estate is worth $12,000 and his personal property is worth $26,000. Not all farms are created equal, though. By stark contrast, in the 1860 slave census also, Richard Baylor at Lloyd's in the northern part of the county enslaved 332 people, down from 480 people in the 1850 slave census. In 1860, his real estate was worth $390,000, personal property worth $401,000, which is a combined worth of, in today's dollars, of nearly $27 million, more than half of which was in personal, translated enslaved people. Running away, and you'll see this in the exhibition, was often the best way to avoid slavery. Almost every issue of the Colony's Virginia Gazette newspaper had advertisements declaring runaways and offering large rewards for their capture. Many enslaved persons from Essex and other parts of the Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck were liberated by the British in the War of 1812. In fact, there's a highway marker right here in Tappahannock that relates that. Those persons ended up in various parts of the British Empire. I have extended family who were liberated from Virginia and ended up in Nova Scotia. Siblings Sally and Billy Potomac were enslaved by Lawrence Muse in Essex County. They joined with the British, were liberated, and ended up in Trinidad. Their family always had oral history as to their Essex roots. And now Potomac descendant Yvette Hewitt of Minneapolis is searching for her Essex County family. The state records of runaways that were filed for personal property tax purposes are remarkable. It's entitled Essex County Record of Slaves that have escaped to the enemy during the war, 1861 to 1863. Hundreds and hundreds of persons escaped from Essex County, demanding their own freedom and securing it, including many women. It's amazing when you read down the list, you see how many women are listed. 31 persons escaped from the estate of Richard Baylor, so apparently he was deceased, in one day, May 11, 1862. 9 others in the next 4 weeks. So when you own a lot, you can lose a lot. M.H.R. Garnett had 23 persons to escape in May of 1862. So many of those persons joined the United States Navy, Many were in the United States colored troops, and many provided support to the freedom effort otherwise. It's not often that we get to hear the story of the enslaved in their own words. And that's the model that we have here. The Reverend Henry L. Young, born in 1810 to enslaved persons, as David has said, on Greenfield Plantation in Upper Essex, recorded his own story. Young was so compelled to learn to read, he used what he had at his disposal. He was able to pay for that spelling book with the cake of cornbread. Because teaching enslaved persons was illegal, he never shared the name of the white person who defied the law by teaching him. Even after learning to read, he couldn't write, and he traveled several miles to a white person who taught him. At the time of the writing of his autobiography in 1897, when he was nearly 90 years old, Young thanked the Lord that he could fairly write his name. After emancipation, Reverend Young went on to found and pastor several churches in Upper Essex and other parts of the county. In fact, he gave rise to a dynasty of preachers. He has present-day descendants who are preachers and leaders in other disciplines. The Reverend Leslie Stevens is one. Her father, Essex resident Angelo Stevens, was the second Black person elected to the Essex County Board of Supervisors. I'll speak a little bit for a few minutes about early office holders. William Breedlove, born about 1820, was a delegate to the Virginia Constitutional Convention of 1867 and 1868, representing both Essex and Middlesex counties. He was freeborn, worked as a blacksmith, and operated a ferry across the Rappahannock River, which got him into trouble. In 1863, he was convicted of transporting an enslaved person who was escaping. However, several local dignitaries sought clemency from the governor for him. And since I've been in this space tonight, David has pointed out that he has a copy of the governor's message of clemency right over there for Breedlove. Breedlove later served as an Essex County Justice of Peace, sat on the Tappahannock Town Council, and was the town's postmaster until shortly before his death in 1871. He may well have been the first Black postmaster in this county. Aaron Commodore, born enslaved, served in the Virginia House of Delegates at the end of Reconstruction from 1875 to 1877. An entrepreneur, he operated a shoe repair shop here in Tappahannock. We had other postmasters. Perhaps the second earliest postmaster that we know of in Essex County was Carter Peterson, appointed by the Postmaster General of the United States as postmaster in Southern Essex and Montague on February 5th, 1883. Carter Peterson was a politico, Republican strategist, and Aaron Commodore colleague, was one of the founding trustees of Angel Visit Baptist Church in 1866. And I believe that on tonight, Peterson's triple great-grandson, Martin Mitchell, joins us from Southern California. Robert Henry Cawthon, my great-grandfather, was appointed postmaster in Dunsville on September 21st, 1897. He was an elections officer and served as a county constable. And over in that case, you will see his picture, a copy of his commission, and a narrative about him. I'll speak briefly about town council members, Tappahannock Town Council. Hansford C. Bateman was the first Black elected to Tappahannock Town Council, and his picture is there. Elected on February 3rd, 1892, serving until 1897. Bateman had previously served as an elections officer. He later moved to Lancaster County and established a successful steamship empire. He owned multiple steamships and even had a contract to carry with the government to carry the United States mail from Middlesex County to Lancaster County. His great-granddaughter, Dr. Julie Sullivan Dethridge, is with us tonight by Zoom from Arizona, where she's a professor at Arizona State University. She's written a biography of Captain Bateman entitled Against the Tide. The Reverend Dabney Carr Winston served on the Tappahannock Town Council from 1897 to 1921. A native of New Kent County, he was ordained as a Baptist preacher in 1897, becoming the pastor of First Baptist Tappahannock. Winston was a community leader for many years, teaching in Essex public schools for more than 25 years, and becoming a leader in the Southside Rappahannock Baptist Association and a moving force in the creation and operation of the Rappahannock Industrial Academy, which you'll hear about later. His great-granddaughter, Bonnie Winston is with us this evening. She's the managing editor of the Richmond Free Press. Her husband, Oscar Blayton, is with her, and so welcome home to Tappahannock. And I believe that other Winston family members may be joining us virtually. Her brother, Leslie Winston, her sister, Pat Winston Kennedy. Yes, okay. So Thomas Latney, and I'm going to make this quick, served on town council from 1900 to 1916. And I read that today and I thought, okay, there's a Latney on town council now. That calls for looking into this. And so I texted Dr. Qualls and said, please send me Anita Latney's phone number immediately. So I said to her, are you related? She said, it's my triple great grandfather. So Thomas Latney, 1900, now his great granddaughter, that's what we mean by triple great granddaughter, serves on town council, elected in 2007, the first Black woman to serve on town council, and she's still there. And so we have to call the names. And so moving on, Alexander Gaines was elected to council in 1921 and served through the mid-1920s. There was no further Black representation for 40 plus years until his son, Ernest Gaines, was elected in 1966. Both Gaines, father and son, were entrepreneurs and major property owners in Essex County and the town of Tappahannock. Almost done. So my last topic is 3rd of April, which is one of my favorite topics. So emancipation celebrations, around the country have been held at different times. There are people who celebrate September 22nd, the day of the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. There are those who celebrate the 1st of January, the day that the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. Then there's the 3rd of April. What is that? The day that Richmond fell to the Union Army, largely through the efforts of members of the United States colored troops. And when Richmond fell, Jefferson Davis had to get out of town. It was virtually all over but the South. Then there were those who celebrate April 9th, of course, when the formality of the surrendering at Appomattox. And then Juneteenth, which many of us didn't even know about, Ranger and Galveston. And so now we've learned that. So all of those. And I used to say, well, we celebrated 3rd of April. Why do I care about Juneteenth? And the reason I care about Juneteenth is I finally realized that no one is free until everybody is free. And so that's when the last ones of us is free. That's why Juneteenth is a federal holiday. So Tappahannock had a major 3rd of April celebration. As far as we know, for at least 75 years, beginning in 1877, Negro schools were closed. There were parades, marching bands, pageants, food, speeches, programs in the courthouse, the Emancipation Proclamation read. Major speakers like regional and nationally known historians came to speak. A person that I interviewed for an article upon the sesquicentennial of the 3rd of April, I interviewed a woman who was 90-some years old, named Josephine Vaughn Dyer. And she said it was a day when we had the whole town. And when you see the photographs of one here, it's like Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. You can't find a place to stand on the street in Tappahannock. So I'm going to wind down now. There's so many things that we could talk about African-American history in Essex County. David's got a jar of soil over there that represents Thomas Washington, the only lynching victim documented in Essex County. We did a highway marker for him late last year. Another jar of soil is at the Lynching Museum in Montgomery. So there's just so much. So we'll have to do this again and again, because I'm going to sit down now. But as I do want to invite you to celebrate the 3rd of April this year at Angel Visit Baptist Church on Sunday, April 3rd, 2022, when we will install and dedicate the Angel Visit Baptist Church hot marker, and we'll celebrate 3rd of April. You'll be able to attend in person. It'll be outside, God willing that it doesn't rain, because we don't have much of a rain plan. Or you'll be able to do it virtually because it'll be live streamed on our Facebook page. And so thank you for listening. I know I've been a long time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ms. Hunter. You are a local treasure, you are a national treasure. I've learned so much this evening. So thank you. So our next presenter, Stanley S. Clark, is an Essex County native and a graduate of Essex High School. He has an associate degree in police science. I didn't know there was police science, but it makes sense, from Rappahannock Community College, and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Columbia College. He also holds degrees from the Rappahannock Regional Criminal Justice Academy, the National Sheriff's Institute, the Virginia Forensic Science Academy, and the FBI National Academy. Stanley is a member of Zion Baptist Church, where he serves as trustee, a deacon, and an assistant Sunday school teacher. He's a representative of Essex Churches Together and a board member for the Tappahannock Rotary Club, and for us, the Essex County Museum. He also serves as the Bay Aging Board Treasurer and sits on the Rappahannock Community College Citizens Advisory Committee. Stanley, as most of you know, retired from the Essex County Sheriff's Office in July of 2018 after 36 years of service, the last 22 and a half of them as our sheriff. He's the son of the late Stanley L. and Lucy E. Clark. He's married to Delois Branson Clark, who was going to join us. So I hope that you're joining us virtually. We miss having you here tonight. And they have a daughter, Ashley. So it's my pleasure to introduce Stanley Clark. Thanks, Stanley.
I will be speaking on the Jim Crow segregation era, which is the middle exhibit here. Race relations took a severe turn for the worse in 1800s. White society decided to segregate blacks and remove them from the political process. Jim Crow, a name taken from a fictional minstrel character, came to be the nickname for America's own system of racial segregation. The new Virginia Constitution of 1867 granted voting rights to all citizens, but in 1902, a revised state constitution mandated segregated schools and required new voting qualifications that removed the vast majority of black voters by requiring poll taxes and literacy tests. Elections in Essex after the Civil War routinely drew under 2,000 votes. In the 1905 election, less than 600 people voted. Mobs throughout the South and in parts of the North took justice into their own hands. Thomas Washington was lynched in Center Cross when he allegedly tried to assault the 9-year-old daughter of a prominent white citizen in Essex County. On the night of March 23rd, 1896, Washington was hanged to a tree on the public road between Cedar Fork and Center Cross, south of Tappahannock. As you heard earlier, we now have a marker placed down in that area. During this time, blacks were forced to look to themselves for survival, finding refuge together in their own churches, schools, and civic organizations. The lynch mob manifested the worst of deteriorating race relations. In the 1880s and 1890s, Essex County politics soon came under the control of a small number of white men, organized into opposing cliques centered around the two Tappahannock banks founded in the 1910s and 1920s. The Democratic Party ruled Virginia, often unopposed. The county paper was renamed the Tidewater Democrat. An example of Jim Crow laws and Southern prejudice was Plessy, a case named Plessy versus Ferguson, was a landmark 1896 U.S. Supreme Court decision that upheld the constitutionality of racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. The case stemmed from an 1892 incident in which African-American train passenger Homer Plessy refused to sit in the car for Black people. As a result, restrictive Jim Crow legislation and separate public accommodations based on race became commonplace. And a few examples of these laws: in 1877, Jim Crow laws began to enforce racial segregation. 1893, lynchings became a common occurrence across the South. And in 1900, Virginia adopts enforced segregation on railroad cars. Now I'd like to speak about two organizations that formed in Essex County, or Essex County participated in. The first one is Southside Rappahannock Baptist Association, which was founded in 1877 by First Baptist Church, Tappahannock, and several other churches in Middlesex and King and Queen counties. Its mission vowed to promote the cause of Christ by fraternal and mutual counsel and by fostering educational and evangelical work. Through the years, the association has been a strong force for Black unity and advancement. It sponsored and operated for 32 years the first African-American high school in Essex County, the Rappahannock Industrial Academy. Still in existence today, the association includes 35 churches. And a few comments about the Rappahannock Industrial Academy. In 1897, the Southside Rappahannock Baptist Association, which consisted of 38 churches, all but 2 in Essex, King and Queen of Middlesex counties, decided to establish an institution to provide Christian education and stress character development for African American children. Additional 129 acres were purchased in 1927. For its first year, which began in January 1902, the school used the pre-existing farmhouse. For the following year, erected a 3-story dormitory to accommodate 45 girls and 2 teachers, as well as a dining hall, chapel, and administrative offices. Soon, a second building could house 30 male students, 2 teachers, 3 classrooms, a library, and a laboratory. The dormitory and other use buildings were named for 2 of the founding pastors, Reverend C.R. Tolles and Dr. R.E. Berkeley. The next person I'd like to talk about is William Bill Moore, which there is a plaque out there on 17 honoring him. Now, William Moore was a blues musician who spent a significant portion of his life in the town of Tappahannock. His ragtime-inspired playing was captured by a Paramount record session held in Chicago circa January 1928, on which 8 songs were commercially released, of 16 that received a copyright. The issued recordings bear the name William Moore or Bill Moore, and are some of the earliest commercial recordings by an African American from Virginia. Moore was living in Tappahannock when he traveled to Chicago to record for Paramount, and his songs reflect the place and culture of the time. Moore's Old Country Rock is a fine example of a country dance tune, with a caller employing various family members and fellow dancers to rock before telling them to step back and let me rock. The song's narration refers to the Rappahannock River in the town of Tappahannock, where Moore worked as a barber. Moore's song, Barbershop Rag, testifies to both his skilled guitar playing and to his profession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Our final presenter is also an Essex County native. Gina R. McGuire is a graduate of Virginia Union University, where she earned a BA degree in English, and Strayer University, where she completed a master's degree in business administration and management. She's also received a diploma in writing from the Institute of Children's Literature. Gina is a playwright, a published author, loves singing gospel and contemporary music and church hymns. She is an active member of the First Baptist Church of Tappahannock, where she is a deacon, serves on the board of directors for the Rappahannock Industrial Academy Alumni Association and the Essex County Museum, and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Gina is the daughter of Miss Lillian H. McGuire and the late Reverend Charles E. McGuire, and has two sisters, Mrs. Brenda Randolph and Mrs. Laura Battle. It's my pleasure to bring up Gina McGuire. Gina?
Good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be here this evening. And thank you, Essex County Museum, for this wonderful display of Black history. Thank you very much for realizing that, yes, we made a difference then, and we make a difference today. I refer to myself as a civil rights baby because I was born in the early 1960s, and I grew up in the house with the orchestrator of change in Essex County, and I will let you know a little bit about him later on. But first, I'm been tasked to discuss the civil rights era. And Mr. Gaines' picture was over there at first. So I'm going to start with Mr. Gaines, just a little bit. That's okay. Mr. Gaines, as it was said, Mr. Alexander Gaines, he was a part of the Tappahannock Town Council. And when he last served, and when his son took office, Mr. Ernest Gaines, it was a 45-year span of any sort of Black representation in the county of Essex county government. That was a 45-year span, and then Mr. Ernest Gaines was elected to the Tappahannock Town Council, and he served for 24 years. He won 12 consecutive elections, 2 years each. So altogether, he served for 24 years. And Mr. Gaines, he was also a businessman. He owned the Exxon Esso gas station back then. Eventually changed the name to Exxon. And he was a very proper man. He wore his uniform. The color of his uniform was sort of like grayish, bluish grayish color. He wore his pants, his shirt tucked in his pants. He wore a bow tie. And I can't remember or not, but I don't know if he had on a hat or not. But he was a very proper man. And he gave full service at his gas station. He would check the oil for you. He would wash the windows for you. He would check your tires, put air in tires. So he was a full service person. He did full service at his gas station. I know when our family took a road trip anywhere, my father, the first thing he did was pulled up in the gas station, and Mr. Gaines did his thing, just gave him full service. So Mr. Ernest Gaines, and he was also a member of First Baptist Church, Tappahannock. Dr. Eldridge Stewart, who is pictured right here. Dr. Stewart, he moved to the Tappahannock area from the West Indies in 1934. And Dr. Stewart became the first Black doctor who established full residency in Tappahannock. There were other doctors before him, but he was the first Black doctor to establish full residency in Tappahannock. He started his business here in Tappahannock in 1934. And my next door neighbor, Ms. Ruth Vaughn, maybe some of you may remember her, she was his nurse for many, many, many years. And Dr. Stewart's, his office was on Duke Street, which is right across the street from the Modern Cleaners today. His office was on Duke Street and his house was right next door to his office. And both are still there. Both buildings are still there today. And after Dr. Stewart closed his business in the evening, he made house calls, something that's unheard of today. He made house calls because I do remember one occasion when he came to my parents' house. It was dark, it was late in the evening, and he came with his medical bag and he was ready to go to work. So that was Dr. Eldridge Stewart, and he was also instrumental in bringing the NAACP to Tappahannock because he knew the individual that was the president of the Middlesex County NAACP. And he talked that individual to come into Tappahannock, and just talking with the individuals at Tappahannock just to get a feel of the NAACP, and eventually we established the NAACP here in Tappahannock. Mr. Reginald Markham, who is pictured right here with his family, his son and his wife. Mr. Markham came here from Long Island, New York in 1937, and he too was a businessman. He built the very first brick structure in Tappahannock on Marsh Street, the Marsh Street apartments. They are now called Markham Terrace. So he was a businessman. And he was a very handsome man and a very sharp man that came here from up north, from New York, to small Tappahannock to bring his ideas and all. And he established Markhaven Beach. Markhaven Beach was in Dunsville. It was a very nice beach. It was for Black individuals. It was a very nice beach. Like I said, it was very scenic. It was surrounded by a lot of trees, oak trees, elm trees, all kinds of trees. And on the Markhaven, on the property, there was a hotel, there were cottages, and there was a picnic area. So you could go and have a good time at Markhaven Beach. And also Markhaven Beach, individuals, tourists, Black tourists who came from out of town, you could go and have a class reunion. You make your reservations in advance, have a class reunion, a wedding reception, all types of events at Markhaven Beach. And my mother wrote an article in the House and Home magazine in 2010, and she said that when the hotel filled up with tourists, there was only one other place in Tappahannock where Black tourists could go to rent rooms, and that was McGuire Rooms on Marsh Street in Tappahannock. And that just so happened to be the establishment that my parents operated. So that was Markhaven Beach. T. Dalmas Harris, who is also pictured right here. Once the NAACP was established, T. Dalmas Harris, or Cousin Dalmas, as I called him because he was my cousin, he and my father were cousins. He became the very first president of the NAACP, and he served for 25 years. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Cousin Dalmas later on. Mrs. Marion Holmes and Mr. Jesse Holmes, who are pictured right here together. Mrs. Marion Holmes, they were a husband and wife team fighting justice together. They were both members of Mount Olive Baptist Church in occupational area in Hustle. And Ms. Marion Holmes, she was the very first secretary of the NAACP. She was a fighter for justice. She and her husband, they sport together. She served the NAACP for 10 years. And I'm told by Mr. Stanley Clark that one of the songs that Mrs. Holmes loved to sing in the church was "I Am Redeemed." Because you know, when you're fighting justice or anything worthwhile, you have to keep the song on your heart. So she kept the song "I Am Redeemed" on her heart. And her husband, Mr. Jesse Holmes, he too was a fighter for justice. He lived too in the occupational area in Hustle. He was a fighter for justice. He was an advocate for our youth and the conditions that they were going to school in at that time. At that time, this is right around the time when the Black youth inherited or got the Essex County Training School from the all-white school. So Mr. Holmes, he was often appointed to be on committees for the NAACP to go and investigate the conditions of these schools. And often the report was unfavorable. So they took it back to the table. And so the only other decision that they decided to do, they decided, well, if these conditions are unfavorable that our youth are going to school in, the only other thing left to do is it's time to build a new school. So right here is the baseball team of the Essex County Training School. And they had on the uniforms, like I said, they were given the Essex County Training School by the white school, and the white school also gave them their uniforms. So in this picture is the baseball team of the Essex County Training School in the uniforms that was given to them by the Tappahannock High School, which was the all-white school in the area. They have THS on the front of their uniforms. So it's time to build a new school. In 1952, the Essex County High School was built. Essex County High School was the school for the all-Black students. In 1958, Mr. James H. Carey, he became the principal of the all-Black Essex County High School. And he was very instrumental, and he also realized the tremendous challenge that he had, because I heard Mr. Curry once say that the school, Essex County High School, was built for 500 students, but 800 students went to the school. So he definitely had his challenge ahead of him. Also, back in those days, the Black schools were very competitive with each other. And Essex County High School, I can say, had the best, no, not only say it because it happened. They had the best men's basketball team in the area at that time. And the marching band was also the best band in the area at that time among the Black schools. The band was led by Mr. Ronald Jordan. And I remember as a youth, as I was about 5, maybe 6 years old, the band used to leave Essex County High School on Marsh Street. They used to march, this is for practice, they used to march up March Street, right past my house, go up to the corner, Church Lane and 17, turn around and march right back out to the Essex County High School. And to me, that was just something to behold. I just had a good time watching it. It was just something to behold. I guess you just had to be there. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. It was a federal law, that said all the schools had to desegregate, had to come together. In 1966, this is when the Essex County Civic League was established in Essex County. And at the urgence of Mr. Ernest Gaines, and my father, who is right there on the end, he was the first president of the Essex County Civic League. And I told you I was going to say something about Mr. Cousin Dalmas later. Well, my father being president of the Essex County Civic League and Cousin Dalmas being president of the Essex County NAACP. These two men together, and like I said, they were cousins, these two men together, they were a mighty force in Essex County. And they walked with authority and they talked with authority. And you knew when you saw them coming, you knew they meant business. They also had followers, and some of the followers that I clearly remember is Reverend Joseph Gardner, Mrs. Louise Hickman, Reverend Ronnie Sidney, Mr. Floyd Beverly, Mr. Francis Savage, and so many others. But those are some that clearly come to mind that I clearly remember. And have you heard the saying, heard the scripture, Lord, prop me up on my leaning side? Well, when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, no one really knew what to do. So I know my father was a praying man, and I know that Cousin Dallas was a praying man, and I'm sure that everyone around them, all their followers, were praying people. And prop me up on my leaning side. Well, the Lord guided their footsteps to Judge Robert Mehaige, Meheige. Okay. And also the Lord guided their footsteps to Richmond, Virginia, to meet with the state NAACP lawyers who were lawyer Oliver Hill, Spotswood Robinson, and Samuel W. Tucker. So the Lord guided their footsteps. They were praying men, and the Lord guided their footsteps because they didn't know what to do. The Lord just sent them. They were leaders, and the Lord just sent them. So the Lord guided their footsteps to these gentlemen. So ushered in is the freedom of choice policy. The freedom of choice policy was drafted, and it stated that the schools must desegregate. They must come together. You have to go to a school, choose a school. It's your choice. Freedom of choice policy, choose a school. So there were some Black students that came from Essex County High School, and they integrated the all-white Tappahannock High School, the high school section of the school. And some of you may remember Mr. Frank Gray, Ms. Margaret Gray. All 6 of their children integrated the elementary school portion of the Tappahannock High School. And between 1966 and 1969, there were 21 students that integrated the Tappahannock High School as well as Rappahannock Central High School. And myself included and my sister, we were among those 21. Miss Catherine G. Amy, the statue that you see right here, she was the first Black teacher from Essex County to integrate a white school, the Rappahannock Central High School in Dunsville. She was the first Black teacher to integrate a high school. The second person to integrate the school was Miss Blanche Washington. She is too from Tappahannock. She was the second person, the second faculty member to integrate the all-white Rappahannock Central High School. And Mr. Ronald Jordan, he was the first Black faculty to integrate the all-white Tappahannock High School. He went to that school as the band teacher. And as you can see, Miss Amy with her decorative collar and her fancy pen, that's how the Black teachers, the female teachers, they were decked. They went to school looking good. I can look through the yearbooks that my mother has at the house, that in the 60s, all the teachers were in pearls and decorative collars. They went to school in stockings and high heels and dresses and skirt suits. They were looking good. And the men were dressed in suit and tie, and they were looking good. So this is an appropriate replica right here, showing with the fancy collar and all in the pen. So thank you, Mr. Jett, for that. So freedom of choice policy is unconstitutional, as related to, as per Mr. Calvin Green, who was a member of the New Kent school system. Because he said, and we all saw that, well, yeah, on the freedom of choice policy, all the Black students were going to the white schools, but the white students weren't going to the Black schools. So the freedom of choice policy was ruled unconstitutional because it was said that it was not adequately desegregating the schools. So Mr. Calvin Green took his school board to court. The New Kent County, Green versus New Kent County. He took his school system to court, and that case ended up in the Supreme Court of the United States. The case was very much like the Brown versus Board of Education back in 1955, when Linda Brown sued the Topeka, Kansas school system because they wanted to bus her all the way across town to go to school when there was a school right down the street from her. So she sued the school system and she won. And just like that case, Mr. Green won his case. So the freedom of choice was ruled unconstitutional and it was disbanded. So the Civic League, Essex County Civic League and the Essex County NAACP and all of their followers, they had to go back to the table and figure out, well, what are we going to do next? So they decided on, well, we gave you a choice, you don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to desegregate the whole county ourselves, and you're not going to have a choice. So they decided to build a brand new school. And then there was the task of, well, what are we going to name this school? And some of the committee members, this was whites and Blacks, they got together, the leaders got together. Some decided that, thought that, Hobbs Hole High School, Tidewater High School, and some suggestions of maybe some segregationists came up. And they thought like, well, no, none of this is going to do. So Ms. Lillian McGuire, who is my mother, she thought about, well, why don't we just name the school Essex High School? So, so they pondered that. That sounds good. This is Essex County, and Essex County High School, that would be a fitting name. So they built a brand new school, and the name of the brand new school was Essex High School. The last school to graduate from the all-Black Essex County High School was 1970. And some of the members that were in that class were Georgetown, maybe some of you might know them, Georgetown, Arlene Roan, Shirley Moore Johnson. Those were just some of the students that were members of that last class at Essex County High School. Essex County High School. And Essex High School opened in January of 1971. And the first graduating class that graduated from that high school were names like Andrew Hintz, Sylvia Darby Allen, Clayton Dandridge, Nancy Connolly Hayden, Jane Wright School, Leroy Hayden, and George Turner. Those are just some of the people that were a part of the 1971 graduating class from Essex High School. At the same time, Essex High School opened its doors, the all-Black Essex County High School became Essex Intermediate School, and the all-white Tappahannock High School became Essex Elementary School. Also, Mr. Robert Johnson, I want to speak about him. Mr. Robert Johnson became the first Black person to be elected to the Tappahannock Board of Supervisors. And his picture is on that display back there. He was the very first Black person in 1979. The NAACP got behind his campaign. The Essex County Civic League got behind his campaign. And he was elected the first Black person to sit on the Tappahannock Board of Supervisors. When Essex County High School became Essex Intermediate School, Mr. Carey, because he successfully maneuvered the Black students and faculties and staff through the Jim Crow era at the Essex County High School, he was promoted to central office. And when he was promoted to central office, Mr. Markham, he became the first Black person to sit on the Essex County School Board. And in June in 2021, the Black community got behind the idea of changing the name of Essex Intermediate School to James H. Curry Intermediate School, because of the fact, like I said, Mr. Curry, he was very instrumental in leading us at that time through that era. I mean, a school built for 500 students and it educated 800 students. He met the challenges undoubtedly during that time. And so in June of 2021, I think it was like June 25th or 26th of 2021, the new James H. Carey Intermediate School was dedicated. And there was a nice crowd out there that day. It was on the lawn and it was a beautiful sunny day. And to God be the glory. I would also like to just mention some other accomplishments under my father's leadership. Reverend Charles McGuire is president of the Essex County Civic League, and Delmas Harris is president of the NAACP. During that time also, there was some discussion about the white businesses in town. They were not adequately hiring Black individuals in honorable positions, more menial positions than anything. So there were committees that got together, the biracial committee and other committees that got together. And it wasn't until the Civic League and the NAACP met with the Essex County Chamber of Commerce. And they decided if Black individuals were not hired in honorable positions, they were going to boycott. So that resulted in Southside Bank hiring its first Black employee, Anderton's department store hiring its first Black employee, Safeway Supermarket hiring its first Black employee, French's Supermarket hiring its first Black employee. And also under their leadership, the Dog Theater, which is right over here, that I don't know if you all, some of you may remember, I know I do very well, how the Black individuals, you have to go through the side door and up the steps to the balcony to see the picture, to see the movie. Well, under my father's leadership and Reverend Cousin Delmas's leadership, that balcony was closed. And the lower floor of the movie theater was desegregated. So, and also a swimming pool came to Tappahannock under their leadership. It was for the Black community on Marsh Street, called Marsh Street Park now. But again, thank you, Essex County Museum, for realizing the accomplishments of our Black leaders in Essex County. Thank you so much. Black lives mattered back then, and Black lives matter today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Actually, thank all three of you guys. This is what we call bringing history to life. You know, it's lovely to be able to come into a museum and see the exhibit and read the copy and see the beautiful artwork that David has, but really to hear the stories behind the stories, that's what brings it all to life. Actually, I wish we had people to come in and do all of our exhibits like this, because it really, you learn so much when you're hearing people that are so passionate about the history. So as we close tonight, I want to bring up somebody that's very important to the museum. Many of you know him. He's Wright Andrews, serves as the president for the Essex County Museum and Historical Society. This is his, well, really it should be his first term, but it's his second term. He's very passionate about history and brings a lot of his passion and commitment and leadership. And he's a pleasure to work with. So, Wright, without any further ado.
Thank you, Mary. And no applause necessary. Just applause again for our wonderful speakers. I just want to say thank you to them and to David for the hard work that they have done in putting this program together, putting this together. You know, this is a sort of a dream for me. I'm just thrilled with it. They did a marvelous job here tonight, and it's just great. About a year and a half ago, our museum announced that we were going to move to revitalize this institution and to make it bigger, to do more things, expand our programming, our exhibits, and so forth. And we agreed at the board level that it was going to be grounded on telling the history of all of Essex County. Some of us felt very strongly that if you're a history buff, you know that African Americans have played a great role in our county. and quite frankly, have never gotten the credit that they deserve. Now, there's a rough times too that need to be talked about, but the board made a commitment then that we were going to make this museum very inclusive, and we are going to tell everybody's story, and we're going to try to involve all segments of our community to participate in this process. And this is a wonderful sort of first big step. Y'all know this used to be a big Confederate display. I mean, that's a big symbol of what we've done right there. But as far as I'm concerned, we're just getting started because there's much more to tell and to do. We want everyone in the county, and those of you that are listening that have roots here, family here, we want you to try to participate with us too. If you're not already members of the museum, please join. We've got committees going on. We're going to be doing a whole lot more. And we need you to participate because this museum is for all of Essex County. So thank you again to our wonderful program presenters and those who worked on this. Thank you who came tonight, and thank you for all of you who are participating virtually. We again hope that you will join us again for programs, that you will join our museum, and that you will help us tell the story of everyone in Essex County. Thank you.